Good morning, folks. The real Captain Kirk here, live from Weather Trends 360 studio here in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. It is Monday morning, only 9 days, 8 hours, 7 minutes, 6 and 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It will actually be spring this Wednesday, 20 March next week at around 5:59 Eastern. Going to take a while before it looks that pretty across the country here. Looking at this week's forecast here for the nation as a whole, 11 through 17 March. Haven't said this in a while either. Warmest in 3 years nationally. 14th warmest in 30 years, with the warmer trends in the eastern half of the country, and again a little bit of a moderation of the extreme cold that we've seen. In Canada, actually, you see quite a bit above average temperatures. Wettest in 9 years. Still can't shake this wet pattern. Number 4 wettest in 30 years nationally. Least snow in 3 years, but that's still the 14th snowiest in 30 years. Much of that precip, obviously, from the Rockies to the plains into the southeast Canada is snow, but this is the liquid equivalent here. If we look at the 6-day snowfall map, we will see yet another system traversing out of the Rocky Mountains here midweek, going through the plains with a large area of 8 to 12 inches in the Dakotas and upper Midwest, and then heads through the Great Lakes and fizzles, of course, as it gets into the northeast time frame. For snow lovers looking for snow here in the east, we're running out of time here, but the model's still hinting at something right out there around the 21st, first day of spring in the east. So again, not totally out of the woods here, but we're just simply running out of time for East Coast snow lovers that are still looking for one last big storm. Looking at the model 2-week snowfall outlook, again, we see that conveyor belt of snow going from the Colorados through the upper plains into the southeast Canada. Most of the snow for the northeast, again, confined to the interior and higher elevation locations. But again, TBD for the East Coast. Still time out there around the 21st if you're hoping for snow. If we look at next week, again, we see the nation as a whole a little bit cooler. Nation as a whole is coolest in 5 years, 7th coldest in 30 years. Cold's confined to the southeast, but we do see the pattern shift a bit with the warming in the west. So this may be hopefully winter's last gasp here as we get, we do think the late March, April time frame into about Easter should be a 3-4 week stretch of warmer weather. May not last all that long, but 3-4 week stretch of mid-April looks pretty promising around Easter. Next week we would say is drier than last year. Haven't said that in quite some time. 13th driest in 30 years. Snowfall less than last year. 13th least snow in 30 years nationally. Thought we'd real quick look at some of the factors that are going to impact our spring-summer outlooks. And one that'll impact usually around the May time frame is a Great Lakes ice coverage index. So right now 71% of the lakes are covered in ice. That's pretty epic compared to last year when we only had 26%. And 2 years ago, when we actually had none, about 6% ice coverage. What this does is just it can prolong the colder weather. Obviously, if you kind of have a refrigerator to your north, Midwest, Great Lakes, downwind can certainly have a cold May time frame, typically with this index. Another factor that we look at is just the soil moisture and drought conditions. And if you look at last year, quite a bit of drought through the central U.S. into the East Coast. This year, non-existent, really limited to the Rockies and up into the parts of the Pacific Northwest Oregon area. This is kind of one thing you can look at, just one of many indexes, but typically ridges like to build over that dry soil, and so that would be a ridge over the Rockies, so that's where it typically would be warmer in the summertime, and then you'd have a down ridge trough from the ridge. You'd have a trough in the Midwest, Great Lakes, getting into the Northeast. So we do think the summer is still overall going to be the coolest in 5 years. Not as wet as the last couple years, but certainly not a drought in the East or Great Lakes Midwest either. So again, a little bit drier, especially as we get into the July-August time frame. But again, overall for the U.S., we'd say the coolest in 5-some years. This time, take you down memory lane. Some of our 60-some thousand Facebook fans certainly recall this 5 years ago. Took my soon-to-be wife at the time, back in 2014, to get married where I grew up as a kid in Hawaii. This was Waimanalo Beach. My wife Simona and I, and so again, when she said she wanted to get married, it was going to be in Hawaii of all places. So again, take you down memory lane here as to a few photos here that we shared back in the day. That March, I do recall here in the States, you all were suffering through one of the coldest in some decades and snowiest in 10 years. It was pretty frigid while we were enjoying 84-degree weather on Waimanalo Beach and Waikiki Beach. Again, grew up here as a kid. Funny story here with the rainbow outside the Hilton Hawaiian Village and Waikiki Beach. Only rainbow we saw, actually, the 3 weeks we were there. It was the only rainbow. As a kid, I remember seeing one almost every day. But for whatever reason, the only day we had one was the day we actually had a photographer on the beach. And we're actually yelling at her because she's fiddling with her bag, and there's rainbow, rainbow. So she fortunately did capture the photos right as we had a beautiful double rainbow, ironically over the Hilton Hawaiian Village, which is the Rainbow Tower is the building there. So again, some 5 years ago today, and taking my wife to, she says we need to go someplace warm and with lots of water. Well, that's hard to do here in the Northeast in March. So we've been looking for some spots here to do that here for the anniversary. But this is where I grew up as a kid in Kaneohe, Hawaii. Just obviously tropical paradise. It's funny that we still can remember the name of the horse was Molokini, I think was my wife's horse, as we went through. This is the where they filmed Jurassic Park on the windward side of Oahu. Lanakai Beach, for folks that recognize the iconic, I think one of the #1 beaches in the world, supposedly. So again, my wife loved it, obviously, built some sandcastles for her, so just great memories. And so again, this weekend, got to take them someplace. The rule was warm and lots of water and an hour away. So the only place for that is Kalahari Resort in the Poconos. So with that, folks, again, have a great week, and we will be back here this time next week.